Good morning, everyone. We've got a full house. I'm so excited to see everyone here. Let's get started.
Hello.
Welcome to Slow and Steady, the rise of cozy games. Let me tell you what we're going to be talking about today. So the first thing we want to investigate is what makes a game cozy. So what is that definition? What was the very first cozy game? We'll go through a history of cozy games. And then how do you categorize cozy game genres? Because there's a lot of nuance to what people consider cozy, right? So those are the three things we'll be addressing today. First, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Ruthie Edwards. I live in New York City. I am a UX designer, a hobbyist game developer, and I also teach design at the School of Visual Arts. My favorite cozy game is I have kind of an on-again, off-again relationship with Animal Crossing since 2002. But now that I have a small creature who interrupts my gameplay all of the time, I'd say my favorite cozy game right now is the New York Times crossword. But and then this hamster game is, we tried to pick what is our coziest games we've ever made. So I made a hamster simulator where you pretty much do nothing but just run on a little hamster wheel and drink water.
So I'm Tyler Rhodes. So I'm an artist, animator, game developer. So Ruthie and I made a lot of games together over like 10 years or so. So probably my coziest game that I made is Succulent Drive USA, where you're a plant and you drive through the desert and plant yourself in holes, and that's the whole game. Yeah. So my games also tend to not have like an ending, and we'll probably get into more of that also with the boring games and the extra cozy games. So yeah, otherwise I'm an artist, animator, do various kind of educational stuff. And that's me as a Jigglypuff right there.
What's your favorite cozy game?
So kind of in the boring games genre, I tend to make games cozy, whether they want to be or not. So like I'll play them incorrectly, which we'll kind of get into.
All right, so what is a cozy game? It's sort of this ill-defined genre, right? It's not exactly as defined as, say, platformer or puzzle, right? It's kind of a non-genre. So how can we kind of put a framework around this so we can categorize these games, label them, tag them, find ways of grouping them? So we'll start with the mechanics. So what game mechanics are the things that the player interacts with. So any of the objects in the game, any of the rules, the goals, and of course other players. And so it's kind of easier to start with the opposite of a cozy game and define what that is and then work backwards. That was how we did this. So on our x-axis here, we'll start by adding one end of the spectrum is a thrilling game. And then one end of the spectrum is a tranquil game. So it's easy to see like, a cozy game would probably fall under that tranquil category, but what does that mean? So let's talk about what mechanics are thrilling. The first mechanic is challenge. That's anything that's like a really difficult or complex quest or task or a puzzle, something that, gets your palms sweaty. The next one is competition. So that means besting or defeating enemies, whether that's, getting a higher score or killing them or any of that. Anything competitive is a thrilling mechanic. The next one is urgency. That's time under stress, anything that's got a timer on it. Spectacle, I kind of couldn't, I don't know if this is the right definition, but any audio visuals that are very spectacular and dazzling, like very exciting. And then unpredictability is the last one. This is kind of an odd one to define, but unpredictability could mean variable rewards, and those rewards could result in surprise, something like a jump scare, But it also could mean that there are some addictive qualities to it, like a gotcha mechanic or a slot machine. So I think those are part of a thrilling mechanic and not necessarily something that would be cozy. So if we take those mechanics and then we flip them on their heads, instead of challenge, we're looking for games that give you serenity. Instead of competition, we're looking at games that inspire collaboration among players or between the player and the NPCs. Instead of urgency, we want that relaxing vibe. And then instead of spectacle, I put delight. It's not necessarily like this overstimulating, like explosions and all this stuff. Delight would be something a little softer, a little more pleasant to look at. And then instead of unpredictability, these games are comfortable. So we took great care to define terms that aren't bad, because we don't think that any kind of game is good or bad. So we kind of chose these carefully, but I think these are a good way to kind of categorize the mechanics of thrilling and cozy games. So the next part is looking at the themes of the game. So this is not the mechanics, this is separate. It includes things like the narrative, the story, the place, the time, ideas, morals, all of the aesthetics and the audio, all of these things that make the game sort of thematically interesting, but don't necessarily aren't mechanics, if that makes sense. So if we put those on an axis, we see this word a lot when describing cozy games is the word wholesome. And those themes might be something that's like constructive or collaborative, creative. And then story-wise, telling stories that are about caring for people or helping people or being creative. And then on the opposite side of that, we chose the word spicy. Because like I said, it's not a bad thing to not be wholesome, right? It's fun to be destructive. It's fun to be evil and like kill Goombas, or maybe there's like a game with adult themes that you like. So we chose that word spicy as the opposite of wholesome. And so that gives us our matrix here for defining. You can put any game on this matrix. That's kind of the gist of it. But there are some contradictions. This is a quote from wholesomegames.com. They curate and now publish cozy games. You might have seen the Wholesome Games Direct, where they highlight a lot of cozy indie games. But they say if a game is cute and cozy, but it contains harmful stereotypes, then it's not wholesome. But if a game is violent, but the violence is about overthrowing an oppressor, they say that is wholesome. So there are, fuzzy borders around all of this. An example would be this game, Lumberjack. You play a bear who's destroying human-made structures, and actually you slap humans. Like it's kind of violent, but because you're trying to save the environment, that's a wholesome theme, so it's still considered cozy. So here's our matrix, and through this matrix, we can define cozy games in this lower left quadrant, games that are both wholesome and tranquil in mechanics and themes. But that kind of leaves us in the top left corner. Well, what if a game is kind of tranquil to play? What if it feels relaxing and has, not time-based mechanics? Maybe it has those creative, collaborative vibes, but what if the theme isn't wholesome? What if it's about, killing or destroying things? So do we still call that a cozy game? What do we call that, Tyler?
We called it sluggy games. So maybe there's a better word for this, but so this is this kind of weird. These are the games I tend to like more. So it's almost like you're getting more into maybe player versus player, or there's some kind of interaction, and maybe you're killing and destroying things, but you can also ignore those mechanics and just be floating around as like a neutral party in a war zone type of thing. So this is a weird little game that I think they're remaking. This one's definitely more cozy, where you're just a deer and you wander through a forest and you can cast magic and it's online. And that's all you can do. So you just wander around and look for other deer like creatures. So it's pretty old, but I think they're redoing it in Unreal Engine or something like that. So this is a Quake map someone made where you just watch grass grow. So kind of similar idea where normally it's a game where you're running around blowing people up and there's like chunks of guts flying everywhere. But through the power of mods, you can do things totally different. And something where it's like basically pointless, where the whole fun is like how tall can this grass actually get, and you have to sit there for, I don't know, 30 minutes or something. There's a neat little skybox. Yeah, so kind of what I was talking about before, where there are these games that you can sort of play them cozily, either just on your own or by modding it or tweaking it in some way. Or if it's an online game, you're existing kind of in this pocket of space, just like dodging all the other players and trying to do your own thing. So here's...
That's the graveyard.
Yeah. So this is the graveyard. So another kind of famous older indie game where you just walk forward into a graveyard as an old person visiting a grave. So kind of darker theme, sadder. You don't, like the controls are pretty limited. So it's like, is it cozy? Maybe, because it's slower. But it is more on like the sadder end of something instead of like I'm comfortable. So here's some fun games. So a lot of these games have in common is there's like 5,000 menus. So they're kind of games that probably the average gamer would never look at because it's way too boring to them. But fun can be had. So there's Crusader Kings, basically a war game. So it looks like this, where there's just like a mess of stuff going on all over the place. So there's like 5,000 things going on the left. You're like a king. You have stats. Everyone has stats. It tracks everyone in the world. So there's like thousands of people. The longer you play the game, the more bogged down your save file gets until it crashes, basically. But you can do stuff like name your empire Illuminati and try to take over the world. And all the mechanics are basically built around building armies and like killing everyone and just growing your empire. But because it's so incredibly freeform, you can just do pretty much whatever. And especially with mods, you can just go like way off the beaten path. So they just added an expansion where you can just play like a random person that's not a noble at all and just wander around and do whatever you want. And people are like, this is way better than the normal game. So you normally get all these pop-up windows that are just like, thank you, my lord, please come to the feast, my lord, and you have to keep clicking like, okay. And then this is all the stuff that you normally see too, where it's like, your baby is unmarried, you have to arrange a marriage quickly. So how Crusader Kings works is you keep playing until you run out of heirs. So when you die, you take over as your children. But that also means like your child could kill you to usurp the throne, and then you take over as them. So it's more weird role play, like almost more like The Sims and less of like a war game. So that's where you can just kind of go off the rails and do crazy stuff. So what is this slide? Oh yeah, so you can also create like your own culture and religion, and then try to spread that through the game. So that's a way to sort of play where you're like, I don't care about empire. You know, like I want same-sex marriage, witchcraft is legal, like everyone's a nudist, we can eat people. And then you can like watch that just spread around the world, and it's funny just seeing what can happen. You can also go into like God mode and just like make a king your religion and then watch it like go nuts as they all civil war each other trying to fight over the chaos you cause. You can have like babies duel people and win. So mostly there's like these choose your own adventure type events, and that's a lot of the game too. So you're mostly like fighting wars, and then someone's complaining that their baby, like your baby hurt them and they want compensation or something. and you have to figure out something to deal with them. This was another funny event where this is based on real life, where a bunch of nobles met in a house, and there were too many of them, and they fell through the floor into like the latrine, and they all died.
That doesn't sound cozy.
Well, it's funny if they're like your rivals, but but there's lots of things where like, yeah, people are dying. There's like diseases and wars going on, and you can be like, I'm a little merchant, and I'm gonna walk across the world for no particular reason and pick up artifacts and just funny, interesting things like that.
That's interesting. So the theme of the game is definitely not wholesome, but you can kind of either play it in a wholesome way or just enjoy the cozy mechanics on this sort of backdrop of almost like a visual novel, right?
Yeah, you could just be like, I'm gonna raise my children and send them to university, and they're gonna love me. And then there's Worm Online. Does anyone know what Worm Online is? Good. So Worm Online is still around. It's maybe 20-something years old. So Marcus Pearson of Minecraft worked on this beforehand. So you can think of it as Minecraft if everything took 1,000 times longer to do. So what takes you like 5 seconds in Minecraft would take you months to do in Worm Online. And the interesting, so it looked like this 20 years ago, and it basically looks the same. So there's almost no graphics, and pretty much what you're doing is like strip mining everything. You can dig the terrain, like level things out. But the interesting thing is it's all player run, so you're just dropped into a blank map with nothing, no explanation, no idea how any of the mechanics work. You're looking at 1,000 menus like Crusader Kings. But because everything's player made, it's all very like community sort of focused. There is player versus player and whatnot, but you can just kind of ignore that. And you basically find people, build a little town, and just do whatever. But mostly you're trying to survive initially, because like bears and spiders are eating you and stuff like that. But normally the game looks like this, where you're just like 1,000 menus, and you're like, oh, you fell down a 20-degree slope and broke your foot, and now you're slow for the next 5 hours and stuff like that. There's no map, so all the maps have to be player made. So if you want to find your friends, you have to just like vaguely explain like stuff in the wilderness and hope that they find you. So this is like a hacked map where we were like intercepting Java applets to get like a bird's eye view of the server, and then you have to draw all these like diagrams of like landmarks to get people. So like I was doing more stuff like this, and I have no idea how like 90% of the mechanics work in Worm because it's too complicated. But you can just wander around and look at stuff that other people are building, which is fun. So people are doing stuff like this, like planning everything in Google SketchUp, and getting like an assessment of how long it would take, and like planning out whole towns and farms and all this kind of stuff, tile by tile, and then you just tell someone else to build it, and the other players will just follow your plan. So we did build this gigantic tower that took forever, just piling up like one unit of dirt at a time. So the other interesting thing with Worm is everything decays. So you end up in situations like this where I feel like it's the only game I can think of where there's like almost archaeology. So plants will grow on their own. So they send out like seeds, and they'll eventually fill up the map. So if someone stops playing and stops paying to like protect their bubble of their town, eventually all the structures will fall down, like plants will overgrow it. So you'll end up in situations where like the wooden walls have fallen down, you might see some frames left. Anything stone will last longer because it's higher quality. So you can kind of know someone is there because maybe the terrain has been flattened and there's like a chimney, almost like in real life, where like a house has fallen down and the chimney is the only thing left. And you'll find like scattered items that someone has dropped, and they've been there for years, maybe in game, and they just haven't decayed fully. So most of the time I just walked around and like looked at flowers and looked at ruins that people had stopped playing. And then I also grew a thorn farm, so I could harvest thorns and plant them and people step on them, which was funny to me. Which hurts your feet. It makes you go slower, and then you keep stepping on them more. And then there's EVE Online. So you guys have probably heard of EVE Online, right? Okay. So kind of similar.
What do you think? Do you think this is cozy? Raise your hand. Okay, two people find it cozy.
So similar kind of idea where it's mostly PvP focused. There's like thousands of menus. You have cool screenshots like this. Like every ship probably costs thousands of dollars in real life, and they're like bring out 1,000 of them. So the whole idea is to blow up someone else's $10,000 ship and laugh at them. So the screenshots look really cool. There's like all these huge wars every once in a while, but it's one of those things like you play for 10,000 hours and you have one battle like in your entire life. And they have to slow the server down to like 1 tick per hour because there's too many ships in a server. So like you have all these cool screenshots. So that's probably like $5 million worth of ships or something crazy. But the game actually looks more like this. Like when you're in a huge thing with 1,000 ships everywhere and there's just menus. And what people do outside of the game is maybe the more cozy part of my presentation. Where, like they're doing more just like planning what they're doing. And so the game is like incidental. And you're just having all these like graphs and charts and like your efficiency curves and all this kind of stuff. Because I feel like you're mostly mining like asteroids, which is like incredibly tedious and boring. But you're pretty much building up money. And then there's the whole kind of meta game of like you might be a spy to like steal everyone's access codes and lock them out of stuff. Some more charts. I don't know how many charts I put on here, but there's this is like I feel like most of EVE, and the shiny graphics is like the thing that they lure you in with until you get trapped in the charts. But some people like charts and like a lot of people I was playing Worm with and stuff, like they're spending all their time like in spreadsheets, and I'm looking at virtual flowers just walking around. So yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about before. Like, are they cozy? Like maybe they kind of are bending into the different genres of maybe they're aggressive, but you can play them cozily. And so I mentioned there's like city skylines where people have modded it to be more like a model train set, and they're replacing every single thing, including the lines on the road, and changing the individual traffic patterns to match the lines on the road. It's something like a normal probably player would never do because it takes you 6,000 hours to like redirect traffic or place individual flowers in a park or something. But you can just keep going and going and going forever with all these crazy mods.
So we're kind of saying here that we think that any game can be cozy. Any game can be cozy if you play it cozily. So one example might be in Baldur's Gate 3. It has Explorer mode, which takes away a lot of the more tedious or difficult or annoying dice rolls, things like that, that would make it into more of a cozy game. There's also examples of there's a Fortnite player who's a dad. His name is like Camper Dad, but he basically never kills anyone in a game, and he's ranked. So what he does is he just jumps off the bus and then hides in a waterfall, which is like a good way to disguise yourself. And then he just sits there for, 30 minutes, however long it takes to get to the last 2 players. And then he just lets the other player kill him. So yeah, this is a ranked player who has 0 kills. So he's playing it in a cozy way, right? You can do all these other things in Fortnite too, besides killing. You can go fishing or drive a car. So we think that any game can be cozy if you force it to be, basically.
That's how I play Battle Royales too, but I win.
Another way that any game can be cozy is if you mod it to be cozy. So this is a Doom mod called Mr. Friendly, and it basically turns Doom into Animal Crossing. So instead of killing the monsters, you can talk to them, and you can actually go fishing as well, which is spectacular. And third, we think any game can be cozy if you think it's cozy. So for example, my husband loves to play Call of Duty Warzone, bless his heart, but he finds that is really relaxing and cozy because he gets to play with his friends. He doesn't really care about, well, he cares about winning, but he doesn't win a lot. But but to him, that's his way of unwinding and relaxing, even though I think it's incredibly stressful. You know, the themes are very violent, and you know, you're competing against 100 other players at a time, etc. Like, it's on our scale the opposite of cozy, but he finds it relaxing. So who am I to say that it isn't cozy? So next we'll get into a brief history of cozy games, peppered in with some examples. One thing we wanted to investigate was what was the first cozy game. So I'm going to go all the way back to the 13th century in India, to this game, which is called Gyan Chopar. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's called the Game of Wisdom. It's an ancient board game that teaches players about karma or fate. The game is really easy to play. You just roll the die and move your pawn. But the theme of the game, and you can see it's very aesthetically beautiful. You can see the theme of it is around virtues. It's teaching players about kindness, generosity, and other virtues. But does anyone know what the modern version of this game is called? Snakes and Ladders. You guys are so smart. So yeah, in the 1800s, the British Raj and the English, they kind of converted that into an English version called Snakes and Ladders or Chutes and Ladders in the U.S. But yeah, it's kind of teaching you about these morals, and very easy to play, like very low stakes. You basically can't make any choices in this game, right? You only get to roll the die and move. But there were lots of early thrilling and spicy games that came up alongside that. So Pachisi is another Indian game that was from around that era. You might know it as Ludo or Sorry. Those are similar games, but those are competitive games, right? You're playing against other players. You're trying to race your pawns around the board to get to the finish faster than everyone else. There were also spicy games at the time, and there are other competitive games like Nard, which was a kind of precursor to backgammon. Games like that often involve chance or even gambling. So games like Nard and chess had both been banned by religious authorities at various points in time for being too spicy. So we saw kind of the contrast between these two games. This very moral, very relaxing game versus a more spicy game that might even involve gambling or competing against other players. But fast forwarding to the modern era, looking at cozy video games, where do we start? We kind of pegged the beginning sometime in the 1980s. There are a couple of odd sandbox games. There's nothing in the arcade scene I would say is particularly cozy, because cozy mechanics don't get you quarters, right? But there's some interesting computer games around this time. Jenny of the Prairie from 1983 was I think the first game that was marketed to girls specifically. So it's a game where Jenny's like preparing for winter by picking berries and building a fort or something like that. So that seemed pretty cozy to me. Sid Meier's Pirates is not exactly a cozy game. Obviously, you can do sword fighting and all that, but you can also win the game by not fighting anyone at all. And there's all these parts where you are trying to marry the governor's daughter and do like ballroom dancing and kind of cozy things. So I thought that was worth a mention because it's kind of a sandbox type of game where there's no win or lose. It's kind of, you do whatever you want. You can trade or sail around and do nothing. Not exactly a cozy game, but sort of getting there.
I just played it for the first time kind of recently, but what I liked is the game ends when you just get too old. But they don't necessarily tell you this, so you just get worse and worse at everything until you like have to retire, basically.
I feel that.
Ain't nowhere near.
So a lot of people will peg the first cozy game as this game, Little Computer People. I'm going to use my laser pointer. Wow. So Little Computer People came out in 1985 for the Commodore 64. It was designed by David Crane, who also designed Pitfall. So it's kind of the opposite of Pitfall. So this was advertised as a game where the little people who live inside your computer, you can kind of watch them walk around their little house. You don't really do anything in the game. There's like a poker mini game, but for the most part, you just watch this little person and their pets walk around in the computer. That to me, and I think this is also a precursor to The Sims and other sort of people simulators. But this is a very early cozy game. Check it out, or at least watch a playthrough on YouTube. It's very cute and very fun. But David Crane said it was inspired by Pet Rocks of the 1970s fad. So maybe that's an early cozy game as well. So let's move up to the mid-90s. We saw some important genres in the cozy game sphere arise. So we saw virtual pets becoming a big fad in the mid-90s. We also saw the first farming games appearing. And then girl games became marketable in this era. Not to say there weren't girl games before that, but games like Barbie Fashion Designer sold 600,000 copies, and game developers said, I can make money from girls. And so you saw a lot more girl games becoming marketable. So some examples of those mid-90s cozy games. I think most people remember Tamagotchis because they were ubiquitous and also annoying with the beeping, but very cozy. You're just taking care of a little creature, an alien, I guess.
I don't know, egg aliens.
Egg creature. But actually before that, there was a game called Dogs or Cats, depending on your preference. But there were these kind of odd-looking creatures made out of spheres.
Now there's babies and other ones.
Oh, there's many, many sequels. But yeah, they had this in the computer museum. But this came out even before Tamagotchi. So this is a game where you just have a pet and you take care of it. You can play with it. So kind of a very early pet game, but definitely in the lineage of things like Nintendogs and later pet simulators. In the farm game category, Sim Farm came out in '93. It's not exactly cozy. It's kind of more like SimCity where you're managing a farm, but you could play it cozily, and it's a farm game. But Harvest Moon is kind of iconic in this genre. It came out in 1997 on the Super Nintendo. And then in the girl games category, there's lots and lots of good examples, but I wanted to highlight two here. One is the American Girls premiere, which is my favorite. This is a game where you have the characters from the American Girls books and you make them act out stage plays. So you can write your own stage plays, you can record dialogue or use the computer voice to read it out loud. So it's very creative, very peaceful. You can also make it say toilet words or whatever, strikes your fancy. That's mostly what I did. And then this game, I Want a Room in Loopy Town. So the Casio Loopy was, I think, the first and only console specifically marketed to girls. It came out in '96 and was discontinued pretty shortly after that. I think there's maybe just a dozen games for it or so. But I Want a Room in Loopy Town is a game where you get a job and you earn money and then you buy things to decorate your house. So very cozy, very a precursor to things like Animal Crossing. Thought that one was an interesting one to call out. So jumping forward actually to the early 2000s, this is where we see new types of gameplay for cozy games coming out. We see lots more of, because the internet is becoming more ubiquitous, more games that have social components. But with games like The Sims coming out in 2000, that was a huge hit, and so it kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to, I could play these more open-ended games. And I can play it in the way that I want. So I can, play it as kind of it's intended to be, or I could use it to make little movies and stories, or I can lock the people in the pool and drown them. You can play it any way you want, right? So very cozy. And then we saw some of these games coming online. Habbo Hotel was kind of the first one that I interacted with, but maybe you played Club Penguin or these other sorts of social spaces where there's almost no game to it. It's kind of just a social space, but we call it a cozy game because it has all of those things: collaborative, creative, helpful, and kind of fun and pleasant to look at. You get to decorate your room or apartment or whatever it was. Don't remember.
Oh, in Habbo?
What's that?
In Habbo, you
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, I don't know.
Been a long time since I played it. And then finally, Animal Crossing in 2002. This was definitely an odd game when it came out. The marketing was all about the game is playing whether you are playing it or not. So it's along the same lines as the little computer people, almost like these villagers are inside your GameCube, and they are living their lives whether you have it turned on or not. So that was a very odd sell to people in 2002. Of course, in 2020, we saw the New Horizons, the sequel, come out and become, I think, the 14th best-selling game of all time. It's massive. So, but like looking back at this era, it was a harder sell to people when you're looking for like the next Zelda release or whatever, to have this kind of weird life simulator where you kind of don't do anything. You just kind of talk to people and walk around. It was a little odd, but it opened a lot of pathways to new types of gameplay. So we'll fast forward to 2018 to 2020. That's kind of when this term cozy reached critical mass. I have a couple of bullets here. So in 2018, there's a group of devs from an organization called The Lost Garden, and they wrote a report on cozy games. So that's a great report. There's a link to the deck, or a QR code to the deck at the end, so you scan it and see all these links and things. But they kind of put guardrails around what is cozy, what are cozy mechanics, how can developers make their games more cozy. And it was a great read, but that's one of the earliest mentions of cozy that I could find. Then in 2019, that's when Wholesome Games started doing their Wholesome Games Direct, where they're highlighting cozy indie games on YouTube. So among their first ones, they showed the Animal Crossing New Horizons E3 announcement and like Ooblets and things like that. And then in 2020, that's when Animal Crossing kind of broke the dam, and we saw the term cozy becoming like a Steam tag, becoming more popular in platforms like itch, influencers like cozy.games, other people posting things on Instagram of like their cute Animal Crossing Switch setup and their other cozy hobbies, kind of alongside the rise of cottagecore and all of that. So that's kind of when it reached a critical mass. And of course, right now we have way too many cozy games to count. So many nice games here. We just wanted to highlight a few that are here at MAGFest in the Indie Game Showcase, aka MIVS. Maybe Tyler, you can talk about some of these that you played.
Yeah, sure. So there's Hank Shaw, Private Eye. It's a very kind of animated style, very slick sort of graphics, but it's kind of like film noir, like solving a mystery. You know, there's guns and murder and stuff, but it looks cartoony.
Yeah, so these are games that have cozy mechanics. So this might be more story-based or detective-based, but it might have those darker themes in it, but it still has the cozy mechanics that we like.
Yeah, like you'll see him drop some change between floorboards, and so you have to pick it up and stuff like that. And then there's the Immaculate Drag, where you're smoking a cigarette. Which is basically the core mechanic, but you're also talking to people in this kind of vaporwave world. So, you know, smoking is bad, everyone. But it's like, it is a cozy thing. And there's a Silencer, so also kind of in this like Crusader Kings-ish world of you're like a bureaucracy simulator. So you're like a dictator is telling you what you can and can't do, and it's your job to like censor the news, basically. So it's pretty much all menus. Bad things are happening, but you may not know just by looking at it. And closing at 2 is there's some of our local game devs in Richmond, Virginia, or at least local to me anyway. And so you're kind of what is it like?
It's actually a horror game, but
Yeah.
in the actual gameplay, you're making drinks. You're a bartender, so you like putting a dash of this and a dash of that, and you're shaking it up. So the gameplay is actually very like mundane and cozy, and the bar itself, the environment is very cozy, but it is a horror game. Like it has those themes. So that's why we kind of put it in that sluggy category rather than totally wholesome, but still worth a play if you like cozy mechanics and things like making drinks. It's very, very nice.
I feel like that's almost a subgenre of like the visual novel that's maybe cozy, and then there's the twist, watch out, and it's always scary.
Yeah. So for games that had more cozy themes to them and not necessarily the mechanics, Fine Work is a cross between a visual novel and a rhythm game. Very beautiful artwork and very nice music, like very pleasant to play. Hook, Line, and Sniper is a very cute looking game. It has a fish with a gun. So yeah, maybe not super wholesome, but it's like silly and cute and fun and colorful. Yeah. Oros is a deceptively simple puzzle game that's very beautiful and has these nice pastel-y colors where you're trying to like draw a circle to connect these numbers. And then Weird Meese is probably the actual coziest out of all of these. You are taking pictures of Mises? Something like that. But yeah, these are all down in the MIVS showcase next to the arcade. So go check these out there and let us know if you think these are cozy. We will summarize this here by kind of saying that cozy is hard to define, right? I don't know that we did a super good job of it, but we tried to put guardrails around what mechanics are cozy and what themes are cozy. But I think this quote from an article on PC Gamer summed it up nicely, which is that the one thing the cozy community can agree on is that nobody gets to define what is cozy for someone else. But all of this said, we're happy that cozy games are multiplying. The gaming community really benefits from the diversity of all these game mechanics, all these new types of play and ways to play games, new ways to collaborate, new ways to like make friends through these games. And we also love the diversity of the stories that cozy games bring. They have a unique perspective compared to your more mainstream like action titles, for example. So a lot of these games also have greater accessibility. That's really important for bringing kind of maybe more patient types of play to people with disabilities. And they also have greater approachability, so they may be easier to pick up than a game that has really complicated controls. Or the graphics look friendlier, so you're more likely to play it. So all of these things are bringing video games to a wider audience, which is a great thing that we love. So that is our presentation about cozy games. This is a very generalized take on it and also a very American take. I think there's a lot of other interesting pathways to explore that I think would be cool for a panel next year if you were to submit one about how like the rise of kawaii culture in Japan is synced up with cozy games, or how like the feminist movement or other facets of world culture tie into this. But you should submit a panel next year, and I will come to it. But for now, we have 15 minutes for Q&A, and you can scan the QR code if you want to get a copy of this on Google Slides, or you can find us online here. But yeah, thank you all for coming. We'll take questions. Question?
Thank you for the panel. How true or untrue do you think it is that the addition of a fishing minigame
So the question is, how true or untrue is it that the addition of a fishing minigame into a game just automatically makes it cozy? True or false?
I think pretty true. I've definitely seen like there was some Doom mod where they just added fishing anywhere and stuff like that.
It depends. So for me, I'm looking at the mechanics, and if the fishing mechanic is too difficult, or there's a sense of urgency to it, let's talk about the Stardew Valley one because I think that one's really popular. It can be tricky, especially if you don't have like good dexterity or if you're tired or whatever. You have to time it exactly right. So is that a cozy mechanic? Because it is kind of exciting or thrilling, right? But then I think about games like web fishing, where you can turn on accessibility modes and make the fishing very relaxing and easy, so you're not having to mash buttons or anything like that. So I don't think it automatically is cozy. I think it depends on the controls, the mechanics. Question?
Back to the slide that had all those games listed out of what you would define as current cozy.
Oh, like this big thing?
Yes.
Okay.
So the question was, can you go back to this? This is just an image that I pulled from the web where somebody had compiled a bunch of cozy games. I've not played all of these, but there are some good ones in there.
You played Sticky Business.
I played
before,
Sticky
yeah.
Business.
I'm surprised Dredge is on there.
Sluggy. Question. The question is, would you consider dating sims to be cozy games?
That was kind of going to that spicy axis, I felt like, or like visual novel land, where, yeah, it's like maybe it's cozy conversation, but then there's the twist, or like the meat, like what you're there for.
I'm going to say yes, just because of the mechanics. So you can play the game at your own pace, right? You're reading the text and responding to it at your own pace. You have the freedom to make choices in the game. That seems very cozy to me as well. I'm going to say yes. Question?
You mentioned choice being a big factor. Do you think like free will is a necessity for cozy games?
Interesting. So the question is, do you think free will is a necessity for cozy games?
I would say no, but I'm trying to think of, like, I feel like you could say like a clicker game is cozy, and I feel like those have basically no free will. It's like the illusion of choice where you're just making number get bigger. So yeah, it's tricky. Like all the games I mentioned were like super high free will-ify, but yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, what about a linear story-based game where, or like a walking simulator?
I'm also thinking like, watching the same VHS tape you've watched 6,000 times is cozy.
Also like Godville, like the autoplayers. You just put it on your phone and it plays itself.
Oh, yeah. You just check back on it later. You can do that in Crusader Kings too. Also.
True. So for example, in Little Computer People, you don't make any choices. The game is just playing itself, but it's still cozy. So think we settled that. Question in the back.
When you guys are designing your own games, do you like try to make it cozy? Like, is that
So the question is, when you're designing your own games, do you try to make them cozy?
I think maybe by default, yeah. Where like my games usually don't have like an end state. They're usually more like mysterious and strange. So you can just like hang out and you won't lose or die. There's no timer most of the time. So I just like those games. And they're easier for me to program, so I can just skip 90% of the mechanics.
I'd say for me, yes. Just starting from the art alone, it's easier for me to draw in a cute or wholesome style than it is to draw super thrilling, exciting, action-y type stuff. I'm not good at drawing that. So from an aesthetic standpoint, yes, I tend to make cozy games, but it's not always the case. Oh, so many questions. In the front.
You kind of explored the upper left quadrant. Do you have any examples of favorite games that would be zero spicy thrilling games?
So the question is, on our spectrum of games, let me pull that back up. Do we have any good examples of games that are, so many Crusader Kings
That's important information.
Games that are wholesome but thrilling? Is that what you're asking?
Or your favorites?
Oh, my favorites.
Like, what would that game even be? I don't know.
I mean, like Tetris Attacks. I mean, there's
Oh, yeah.
yeah, something very puzzly that's cute, but is also super exciting. I get really competitive over.
Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine.
Question in the back.
You mentioned several games that like aren't necessarily designed to be cozy, but like you can make them cozy. Out of the ones that like you didn't put in here, what do you play, or that's like the most that you have played or know people who play that's the most unlikely game that people have made cozy?
Interesting question. So the question is, what is the most kind of unlikely cozy game? A game that maybe people wouldn't consider cozy that you play in a cozy way?
Pretty much all the games I showed are the games I play. And then, but there is also like, I feel like with mods you can go very far. So there's lots of, like, here's Half-Life, we're shooting aliens. But I'm not doing that. I'm role-playing as a nurse.
Yeah, I think Don't Starve is one of my favorite games, but it's decidedly not cozy because it's like, it makes you so nervous and stressed out because you are trying to manage your hunger and sanity levels while like finding food, and also there's dogs chasing you. Like, it's extremely stressful game, but you can change settings and mod it to where you're just building a cool fort with your friends because there's the online component. Maybe something like that.
I guess there's also stuff like Grand Theft Auto roleplay.
Oh yeah, Grand Theft Auto roleplay. That's an excellent example. Question right here.
How much does, I'm trying to figure out how to word this, and I'm so tired, and I apologize. How much does music go into like making a cozy vibe? Like, obviously, if you make like an intense battle theme, like of course it's not gonna be wholesome, but like I'm thinking like, for example, half the vibe of Stardew is the music, you know?
Yeah, so the question is, how much does the music play into making a cozy vibe?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty important, especially if it's like, oh, the fishing time to stand here and do nothing. Like, the music will keep you there.
Yeah, that's a great point because even though I've had to delete Stardew Valley because I play it too much, I still listen to the soundtrack on Apple Music or Spotify or whatever all the time. The music almost transcends the game. I probably listen to the music more than I have the game. So yeah, really important.
And in that space, like how do you make a song like cozy? Because I there's some great like intense music that I can consider cozy, but I don't know how to word it. I'm so
So I think a good example is
The question is, how do you make music that's cozy? And maybe if you have, I'm not a musician, but maybe we can find some suggestions.
but there's another game with 1,000 menus, Dwarf Fortress, if you've seen that. But so they have very cozy music, I feel like, and it's just a guy like noodling on a guitar, and I think part of it is the track is maybe 20 minutes long or something like that. So I think that's part of it. If you make the track very long and very like serene, you aren't getting annoyed by the music because you might sit there for hours, but you've only heard the track 5 times or something like that.
Yeah, maybe music that is a little more ambient that comes in and out of the scene, like in Breath of the Wild, could be considered very cozy because it's maybe less melodic than, say, like the battle themes from the same game. In the back.
So, not so much a question, but like someone asked if you can make like other games cozy. When I was growing up, there was a shooter game I don't remember the name of. My father, my brother, and I would play hide and go seek.
Aww. Yeah, so sharing a memory of playing a shooter game, but playing it in the wrong way, or in our case, the cozy way, by playing hide and seek in a shooter. So yeah, me and my sister would do the same thing on Mario Kart, where we would just go into 2-player mode and go off the track and like explore the castle, things like that.
And it's just warning you, you're going backwards the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably my favorite way to play any game, where you metagame and so you're doing your own thing. I was thinking about like fantasy football, where people are like, football is now too boring. I want to make another game on top of that game that I think is more exciting.
Weird example. All right.
In one of the beginning slides, it was like defining cozy games. You said a game could be wholesome, was like against an oppressor. Do you have any examples of that?
The question is, do we have an example of a game where it's considered cozy and wholesome, but it is maybe has more of those spicy themes, like rising up to an oppressor? Did you have a suggestion to that?
I have two for that actually. So, partner just suggested Untitled Goose Game is the first.
Yeah.
And the second one that I personally played a lot of is called Anarcute, where you control a riot and you're fighting the police, but it's playing the coziest, cutest music of all time. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Any other suggestions for games that are spicy but cozy?
Beyond Good and Evil.
Beyond Good and Evil. Okay.
Oh, okay.
In the
So
back.
you're like a photographer, right, or something? Okay.
And also overthrowing the evil conspiracy theories.
Did you have a suggestion?
Yeah, like maybe something like Chicory or Wander Song could do that.
Chicory or Wonder Song. Okay.
A little more of like a nebulous villain, but still works against it.
All right. Last question here in the front.
Well, his comment about football and coming up with something else, it just popped in my head. Incorporate football with skeet shooting. Somebody on the team has a shotgun and they got to take the ball out when it's being passed to kids.
I mean, that'll.
Or the other player. It doesn't matter.
I mean, I'm sure that. So that pretty much is a game called Blood Bowl.
Is this a concept for a game that you've been thinking
No,
about?
I don't know
Or-
anything about gaming, but weird stuff pops in my head all the time.
All right. Well, someone write that down and then make it into a game. Okay. Thank you all for coming. We'll just hang out and chat if you want to, but thank you so much.